Have we learnt anything new, both from hearings this morning, the COVID inquiry, but also from that Business Select Committee inquiry as well?
Yeah, the two biggest lines, I was at the inquiry yesterday, and the two biggest lines that came out was that apology and acknowledgement that Fujitsu had a moral obligation. And the point I'd make about that is the moral obligation, or the moral backbone that Fujitsu have suddenly discovered, has conveniently only arrived after the public outrage after the ITV drama. If Fujitsu acknowledged its moral obligation to pay into the compensation pot for sub-postmasters, that would have been put into its accounts. There's no notification in its annual accounts in any of the last preceding 3 years since this scandal broke by Fujitsu that they would have to hand over cash to help exonerated sub-postmasters. It seems to be a PR strategy because they know that the PR fallout is only going to increase if they don't do something.
Well, that's
Maybe I'm being
the
cynical,
thing, isn't it?
but yeah.
Even when they said, oh, you know, we have a duty to, a moral obligation to compensate, you just think, okay, how much and when? And as you say, when did you suddenly discover this? Because as brilliant as that ITV drama was, there was not a single new fact in that ITV drama, which brought it to life for us ordinary mortals, that they didn't already know.
Correct. And I think their moral obligation will only stretch as far as their fiduciary obligation to their shareholders to minimise the amount of money that they do hand over to exonerated sub-postmasters, simply because that's exactly what big corporations do. They look at the risk, they look at the potential downside to them, and they make hard-headed calculations about it. And I don't think this sudden acknowledgement that Fujitsu had a role to play in this scandal and had a moral obligation to compensate people came from anything other than the public outrage into this scandal.
The
second point.
Yes. Oh, let's offer some money and minimise the problem. But we've even had, you know, the man who was, of course, the star of that drama, the star really of the fight back for justice from postmasters, Alan Bates. He gave evidence as well to the Select Committee, and he was basically saying, you know, not only have we seen people already die, not just the people who committed suicide, but people who have died of old age and other illnesses. But he said more people are still going to die waiting for compensation, even though the government's saying they're going to bring in legislation to speed this up, to exonerate people en masse, so that they're entitled to get the compensation and moving on. We are still going to be looking at, I mean, everyone's saying hopefully weeks and months. I mean, I've never seen the British state act that quickly. We're probably going to be looking at years, aren't we?
Well, you beautifully led me on to the second point that I was going to make about compensation and the newsline which came out of the Select Committee yesterday, which was that Alan Bates, the man who has led this campaign for more than 2 decades since he was sacked as a postmaster in 2003, who has, with the power of the sub-postmasters behind him, but largely through his own nous and ability, got us to this point whereby everyone who's been affected by this scandal is at least likely to get some form of compensation. His claim for compensation has not yet even been given a single offer. He was entered into the government's compensation scheme for the litigants who took part in the High Court claim in 2019. That was only set up last year. The government promised, on the record, the Post Office Minister, Kevin Hollinrake, promised every applicant to that scheme that they would receive a first offer within 40 working days of making their application. Yesterday, Alan Bates told Parliament that he put in his application at the beginning of October. It's the middle of January, 66 working days, as he very precisely said in the committee, and he hasn't received his offer. You would have thought the officials, the Department for Business, would have thought this is something we probably need to focus our minds on. The fact they can't even do it for him just shows, it's emblematic of how awful this compensation schemes have been.
Absolutely. And again, even the compensation that's been talked about, even the numbers of the 75 grand of the basic, and if you've gone to, you know, if you've gone to being convicted, you're 600 grand. I don't even think that touches the size of the losses people had. They lost their business. They lost a lot of people lost their homes, losing their livelihoods, reputation. I think is the number one key thing. You're a fine, upstanding member of society, never committed a crime. You wouldn't be able to run a post office if you had. Your reputation is totally thrown away. People lost their families, lost their friends. People were spat at in the street because people thought they were dishonest. To lose your reputation and to have it done in what I believe was a malicious, quite deliberate, criminal perversion of the course of justice, which I believe happened. 600k doesn't touch the sides of what happened to these people. I think they should be entitled to millions. I genuinely do. And I also think, and I'm sure you agree, people need to go to jail for this. They need to go to jail for this, because there needs to be a clear message that goes out that when you do this and you know what you're doing is wrong, and they did know what they were doing and they did know it was wrong, you have to pay.
You're not alone in thinking that there was a criminal conspiracy to pervert the course of justice at the post office. Lord Arbuthnot, who used to be an MP and before that was a barrister, has been campaigning for sub-postmasters for well over a decade. He, more than anyone, I think, is appraised of the facts outside the inquiry. And he is certain that when the post office decided in 2013 that it was going to cover up the fact that it may have had potential miscarriages of justice on its hands, rather than tell Parliament, a criminal conspiracy began. There's a 4-year ongoing police investigation into this scandal, which started when the judge at the High Court said that he was so concerned about some of the evidence that Fujitsu engineers had given to the courts in the prosecution of innocent people that he was going to pass a file to the Director of Public Prosecutions. That started as a perjury investigation. It's now become a perjury investigation and an investigation into whether there was a conspiracy
I think
to pervert
this
the course
got
of justice.
so much further to go. So appreciate you joining us. You're so knowledgeable on this.